Hi, everyone. Welcome to Talking Tech with Creative Podcast. I'm Stella Oni, your host. So, if you've heard me before, you know that I try to bring different guests to the podcast. And lately, it's just you would have heard, if you'd heard Hamid Ibrahim, you'd know that I'm inclined towards a bit of filmmaking and production and movie making, especially when it comes to African stories. So I could not resist. I have another guest today who is going to tell us about storytelling and filmmaking, which is in the African context. So his name is Dilman Dila, and he's a storyteller, he's a writer, and is a filmmaker. And I'm quite intrigued because an area that I don't know as much about, and I'll still try to do a lot of delving and asking questions, is filmmaking, translating the works, the written work to that medium. And Dillman fascinates me because he's not just a storyteller, but he's been able to translate that to film. And he's got quite a lot of short films on YouTube. I have a lot of questions for Dilman. Dilman, welcome to the podcast. I
Thank
want
you.
you to tell us a bit about yourself and just tell us a bit about your background. Let's start from there and how you came into writing and making film.
Yeah, I started writing, I think, when I was 15.
Mm.
Yeah, that's when I started. The first time I decided I'm going to be a writer. And then at that point, I was in secondary school, and then other children, they started laughing at me about what I do. Well, this is, you're dreaming too big, you're fantasizing. It's not something that you can achieve. But then I started writing at that same moment, and then everybody was looking at me and they even laughed louder. But yeah, that is when I got into trouble with my parents as well, because they were thinking that I'm not going to be able to pass my exams. I should focus on books and things like that. But then I stuck to it. Of course, I passed my exams even when I was doing my writing and I was reading novels a lot. And a lot of people could not understand how that was happening because I would barely attend class. But in retrospect, I think being an avid reader helped me to be able to grasp school books really easily because I will read for pleasure. So when I go to read for exams, it wasn't a task, it wasn't something burdensome. So I could easily read. So when I finished university, of course, wanted I looked around for writing jobs, but I couldn't find good. Like I realized pretty quickly that I can't make a living out of only writing. And then this was the early 2000s, and Nollywood films were a boom all over
Okay,
the continent.
you were popping, yeah.
And yeah, everybody was watching them. And then I realized that, oh, I can actually make money from this kind of thing. And that's how I began looking into making films. I started learning how to, I taught myself a lot of it. Up to now, I still teach myself. And then along the way, because I like writing, or I like creating science fiction works and
Mm.
fantasy,
Yeah.
but creating them requires the knowledge of visual effects. And I began teaching myself CGI using computer software and things like that. And that's how I found myself doing digital art. So I find myself in a lot of art spaces, using a lot of art mediums, though I'm more known for writing and filmmaking because I keep looking for ways of earning a living and of
Mhm.
surviving and
Yeah.
to live off my storytelling, not
Yeah.
working in an office somewhere or something like
Mhm.
that. Yeah. So broadly, that is me, and I've been recognized here and there for my writing.
Yeah.
Been shortlisted in a few awards. The most recent was the Philip K. Dick Awards for my book, Where Rivers Go to Die. which is my second collection of short stories. And then for film, I've won 1 or 2 awards, but within the continent. Yeah. And so that's briefly me in broad strokes.
Excellent. And I think my audience will think I'm partial to Ugandans because you're the third Uganda I've had on the podcast. Because
ah,
I had Amid Ibrahim of Kugali Media, and I
yeah.
had a lady called Shanae Gondo. And yeah, she too, she's Ugandan, based in the UK.
Mm.
So
Oh, okay.
I wonder what is in you. I'm very curious about what is in Uganda that brings some such brilliant minds and starting early as well. No, seriously.
I think maybe it's where there is a lot of misery, a lot of trouble,
Yes.
a lot of political instability.
Yeah.
Arts thrive in such kind of things because people
Yeah.
look for ways of expressing
Okay.
themselves. They look for an outlet for this thing, and that's, I think, Uganda. We've had a pretty troublesome history. I think, like many other African countries, but we had like very long periods of war. And up to now, every time we have elections, there's a lot of people dying, there's a lot of stuff that happens, which, I think this kind of thing makes people want to make art to bring out their grievances and things like that. I think, in broad, generally speaking, that will be it. But also, like most African people, we are very much in touch with our past in many ways. Of course, colonialism did not destroy everything.
Yeah.
And one of the things that remain, and that kind of, I think, for my case and for actually many people who I know, is the oral storytelling. It doesn't happen, of course, in the fantastical way we hear about, like sitting under a big tree in the moonlight with fires and all that. But there is a certain vibes you get when 2 or 3 people are gathered somewhere. You will hear stories being passed around,
Yeah.
or if some men are drinking beer somewhere, they will tell each other stories. And as kids, as a child, these are some of the stories that kind of drove me.
So that, yeah.
But even some of these stories are like, we have what we call night dancers in Uganda, and
What are those?
I night dancers, they are night dancers.
So what are they? Are they like, do they dance in the night or? And
Ah,
I just,
yeah,
ah,
yeah, they do dance in the night. Actually, my most recent film is called The Night Dancer,
okay,
and
I'll
it's
go there.
about such a thing. But they are a mythical character, and there are many, like every village will have its own version of what a night dancer is and what it does. But the most popular version is that they eat the dead. So they make the dead come out of the grave, and
Ah,
then the dead person walks to wherever the night dancers have gathered, and then they have a feast. And so, yeah, this kind of is in the imagination of Uganda. You come here and just say, mention night dancer, someone will go for the story that, oh, I know of a night dancer in this village, or I know of something like this. And it doesn't stop there, because you end up seeing it in the newspapers, like the national newspapers on the
yeah.
front page, and
Oh,
there's a
really?
story about, yeah.
Oh my God.
There are such stories. So there is a certain belief, and yeah, people really believe in this kind of stuff. And some people, someone says, what doesn't exist doesn't have a name,
Mm,
and what has a name
mm.
exists. So for Ugandans, the night dancers are there.
What are they didn't exist? I love that.
Yeah.
So those are the things that fired up your imagination when you were growing up. So in terms of like
Mm.
books, for example, because say you got into reading. So where did you find your books and what kind of books did you read? I'm curious because I got into reading through my parents, through my mom's library and my father's library and the public library. So how did you get into reading? As opposed to football and all the sports that boys play.
I actually discovered books a bit late.
Mhm.
I think I was 10 years when I read my first book, if
Yeah.
I remember properly. Uh, I think maybe I had one or two encounters with books before that. I remember my earliest memory is begging my mother to buy for me a book. I think it was a red book. I probably had a spider on the cover. I don't remember well, but I think it was a red book. And I was like begging her. I was like, I want this book. I want this book. She had my money.
I didn't want to
when
release it.
yeah, like the relatives who visit and then
Yeah,
it
of
gives
course.
you the money. But of
Yeah.
course, it's the mother who takes the money. And so I went to the bookshop and I saw the book. And so I began begging her. And I'm like, you use my money to buy this, to buy this book. But the one that I actually remember reading, I was about 10 years. It
Mhm.
was a West African book called Yo and the Python. I read it, I think, from the school library because that was the age when I was now allowed to access books in the school library at school. But at home, my parents, they were readers as well. My father, he was more into communist stuff, so he had a whole bookshelf full of communist literature. And it's only when I was an adult that I realized that these were handouts, which, yeah, like free books. It's not like he bought anything. He probably subscribed to some communist publication and then they kept sending him a lot of that kind of
Yeah.
literature. Yeah. But I think when I was about 12, I saw my mother reading a book, and it was also a red book, but not the same red book that I was
That you
looking for.
wanted.
Yeah. I remember seeing her sitting on her bed and reading this book. So when she put it down, I picked it up,
Yeah.
and it was The Clocks by Agatha Christie. And I
Oh,
read, yeah, I
I
read
bet
the
you
book, I
got
think.
drawn in. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's when I began now actively reading adult
Good.
fiction because that was not just a children's book. I think that was I was around 12 at that point. So by the time I was 15, the good thing I went to this school that had a big library.
Oh my God.
Yeah, like they had a lot of books, but most of it was from the colonial era. But
Okay.
I didn't really mind because they were storybooks. And so by the time I was 15, I remember trying to read 1,000 books. I don't remember how it ended, but I was on that mission. I was like, I have to read 1,000 books.
Wow.
And so I'll go to the library every time and pick a book and try to read and try to read.
Mhm.
So yeah, I was really obsessed with books at that time. But yeah, I never had that childhood where people, they're having books in their early formative years.
Yeah.
That I started it very late, like around 10 years.
It too, actually, because I grew up with my grandmother. My first 9, 10 years was with my grandmother. So I didn't grow up around books.
Mm.
My parents were in Britain. So I grew up,
Uh,
but actually I know that being exposed to books early is good, but for me, I value the fact that I was not that exposed to books at that age because I
mm.
had a different way of actually consuming or getting stories from music,
Mm.
even politics was all from music, from TV, so I got all my thing, everything from the streets and from the adults and everything going on around.
Yeah.
They're reading. So I
Mm.
believe for me, I actually would not change that for myself.
Yeah, I think it also worked well for me in that sense because this was the 80s
Yeah,
and we didn't have a lot of entertainment.
yeah.
So we told each other stories. And every time there was a lot of load shedding, almost every night. And
Yeah.
whenever power would go, we would sit around in the kitchen when somebody is cooking, either the mother or the house girl or somebody. And then we'll tell each other stories. And those are like some of my fondest memories. But then outside of that, even just at school during break time, as other people are playing football, we told each other stories, a
Mhm.
lot of stories. Of
Yeah.
course, most of them were like stories of night dancers, but there are also
I
other
don't think
creatures.
that's okay.
Yeah, there are a lot of creature characters that I encountered at that in that formative year.
Yeah.
Things like Abiba and Abiba people, they fly at night,
Oh,
but with
yeah.
fire coming out of their buttholes.
Oh my
And
God.
so,
That is scary.
yeah. Yeah. So by the time I began reading books, and of course, when I would see a dragon, or I find a dragon in a book, I wouldn't find it so strange. And
Yeah.
I would even find it a bit not, how do I say, not as entertaining as the characters I was used to.
Mm.
Because when you talk of a dragon, it's a monster, it's not a human thing. It's somewhere in the in the mountains or wherever, and it flies, it's a lizard, so it breathes fire. And you're like, oh, okay, that's it. But then you're comparing that with the story of a person who shits fire, who farts fire while flying, and tell me how the dragon is better. Is
The
a better.
dragon and the human being.
Yeah, you get. By the time I started writing, I didn't like. Yeah, of course, Western books, of course, influenced me.
Yeah, of course.
And in the formative years, there was a lot of Stephen King in my writing.
Yeah,
Like, I look at some of my stories and I'm like, oh, okay, this is pretty close to this Stephen King book.
yeah,
And yeah, when you're learning how to write, to imitate somebody.
yeah.
But when once I got my footing, I think my mind just switched back to the old stories that I loved and the stories that I know are lacking in today's. Yeah, because everybody else is telling stories about dragons and vampires and things like that. And yet the stories that are still in my head that I have had from the time I was a kid, they are far more interesting. The characters are far much more,
Yeah.
yeah, they're out of this world. And you don't even need a whole movie to enjoy them. Just one
So,
line and you're laughing.
yeah,
But to a
absolutely.
vampire, you need probably a series before you begin getting a sense
Like
of
it is, yeah.
yeah.
So your stories, yeah, because I see that there's African folklore with speculative futures. So I'm curious about how the sci-fi aspect, and there's a lot of speculative futures, some horror in your story. So you have a real blend
Mhm.
going on there. So how did you arrive at what you felt was your, it's almost like a signature in a way. How did you arrive at that? When you started creating, when you started moving from like the written word into story, into translating it to film?
Yeah. I don't know. I think I don't know if I arrived at a certain particular style or like what but I think it's always been there with me. Like these are the kind of stories that have wanted to be told. They have just been struggling in my head from the time I was a kid.
Yeah.
Like even futurism stories, people are always thinking of science and technology, and but when they think of science and technology, they don't think of Africa or they don't
Oh,
think of our traditional ways of knowing. But then when I was growing up, I saw some of this in Amos Tutola's works, like the television handed ghost. And this Tutola was writing about television, and yet he did not ever see a television.
no.
Or that's what I had. That by
Mm,
the time he died, I'm not sure when he did. There was no television yet in Nigeria, but he was writing about a ghost that has a television in his hand, which
mm,
today you might think of as a phone, because yeah.
yeah.
But in his book, The Bush of Ghosts, there is a ghost that has it can see things on its palm, and
Mm,
it doesn't need to travel to wherever to see this. So that someone will say is magic, but of course, when you now look at what the world today, we have videos in our palms.
mm,
There was a bit of science going on there.
yeah.
And growing up, we were hearing these kind of stories. We heard of people who would turn mirrors into TVs,
Mm,
and they didn't need to go wherever to watch something. They will do things on their mirrors, and then they see all pots of water, and they look into the pot, or a calabash of water, and they look into it, and there's a TV there.
mhm.
And of course, the connotation was that there is something magical about it.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, I keep thinking that maybe it's just an alternative way of knowing that we don't. That because if you look at our knowledge systems or our education currently, it all comes down from a very small part of the world, which is the Middle East and Europe. Mathematics, physics, all everything we are being taught in school. They originate from that area of the world.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then when you really ask yourself, like, is this the only knowledge that is
That
there?
exists. Yeah.
But somehow we've been made to believe that this is the sum of physics. There is nothing else outside the laws of physics as we know them. But when you look at maybe Egypt, okay, Egypt is very close to that world, so maybe let me leave it out. But when you go to South America and you see all those weird civilizations that, were there like 5,000 years ago,
Yeah.
you have to ask yourself, what laws of physics were they using?
The Incas,
What were they
and
studying at school?
Incas and all that. Yeah.
Yeah, what was their mathematics? What were their mathematical theories? When you go down south to Zimbabwe with its big ruins, you'll ask yourself again the same thing.
Yeah.
How did they come up with such a giant structure if they did not study the mathematics that we are studying in school, or the architecture and art or physics that we are being taught?
Yeah.
But maybe closer to my subjects is I keep giving the example of rainmakers. People, yeah, even now you'll hear rainmaker and you laugh. But then when you look at China, they're trying to influence the weather through something called cloud seeding. Yeah. And then, but when the African person is doing it, they're like, oh, that is juju. But then somebody else is doing it using science, and they're calling it, oh, this is science and this is
Yeah.
technology. I've been investigating rainmakers for a while, and those ones around my place.
Yeah.
First, there is a community in Kenya called the Ngai, and the meteorologists in Kenya actually work with this community to predict the weather, because these people, they're near a forest, but they can predict the weather more accurately than the gadgets of the meteorologists, because they have learned how to observe nature. They observe ants, they observe plants in this forest, they
Yeah.
observe, and then they know, oh, it's going to rain, oh, it's going to. Because when you even ask yourself, you'll never see ants drowned in rain. They will always know, oh, it's going to rain, and they
They go and hide in their hiding places.
yeah, they go and hide. Even birds, and you won't find them caught in the rain, like very where they can't find shelter. I rarely see that. Like a bird is just, oh, all of a sudden it is raining and the bird has nowhere to go.
Yeah.
So these people, they've observed nature and they can predict the weather. And outside, so going back again, maybe to, okay, this is knowledge that we have it now, but then there's that which is already lost. Like when I read old books about rainmakers, I find them describing what was needed to make rain. Like in the Acholi, which is somewhere in northern Uganda, they had what they call rain-making stones. But these stones could only be picked from particular rivers and at the bottom of the river. And then there were things around these stones, like you couldn't touch them with your bare hands. You needed to have certain medicine before you can touch this stone. Otherwise, you die. And in my simple mind, I'm like, this might have been some kind of mineral.
Yeah. It sounds like
And yeah, it's a mineral.
yeah.
And then you burn this, yeah, because this stone was supposed to be put in a pot and then with other herbs, and then they burn it and then to make rain. And I'm like, that kind of is cloud seeding, because cloud seeding, they do something and to influence the clouds, and then rain comes. So yeah, there's all this knowledge that has been lost. But when I look at our system, so it's just about looking at things from a different perspective and asking yourself, okay, why are we sticking to only one particular knowledge system from a very narrow part of the world? And yet there's a lot of these other knowledge systems, other ways of knowing that have been lost. Of course, we're going to blame Christianity and Islam because they are the biggest culprit, and of course colonialism. But colonialism brought Christianity and I think Islam to some extent in some parts of the world. But yeah, colonialism, slave trade, those are the things that made some of these religions. And of course, as these religions spread, they spread with the concept of primitivity, people in Africa primitive,
Yeah, yeah.
superstitious, and all that thing. So whatever they found here, they rubbished, and they couldn't. They were like, "Oops!" They didn't even bother to study them because they came with a preconception that there is nothing there. Yeah, you find a lot of, like, the architecture in much of Africa respects the nature. So
Yeah,
there was a certain worldview that was predominant in the continent. But now, because somebody has come from a place where the architecture does not respect nature, then they come and find mud huts and they're like, oh, this is primitive.
yeah.
But they forget what
That
is the worldview behind that hut. Because if you ask yourself, why is it that the whole continent had this kind of mud and they never built with stones or
yeah.
with,
It
yeah,
was
this, there is a certain worldview which is very common in very many African cultures. And like from the communities I've studied, before people will settle in a place, or before you build your house, they will tell you to defecate in that spot. And then you observe the insects that come to your feces over the next several days. And then, based on what insects come, you either build or you don't build. But this was a very simple way of just acknowledging that you're not the only inhabitant of this area. And so you respect other inhabitants who have been there before you, and they are not human, they are not what. So, of course, there was a bit of mysticism and spirituality involved with these belief systems. But I think, yeah, we've lost a lot through colonialism and through these kind of things. And I think if, say, we want to tackle things like climate change and whatever other ailments we are suffering now, it might be a good thing to just look back and see what our worldview was and what our ways of knowing were.
yeah,
And yeah, and so this is how I kind of think about future works and futurism in my stories.
yeah.
Yeah.
That is amazing. So the question I wanted to ask is in terms of because obviously now there's anthropological aspect to your stories as well. So you're blending quite a lot. And of course, we know that with African, there was civilization began in Africa, but a lot of things that were written had been lost. So we only have the a bit of oral tradition. Not a lot has been lost in the past. And so, because you don't have those written things, like you said, anybody can just come in and just assume the power that be can come in and just make any assumption that they want about
Mm.
that. But we now know that looking in the past sometimes does help, especially like you
Yeah.
said, with climate change. So let's talk about your filmmaking. So I wanted to understand the mechanics of you making those films, making because not
Mm.
just the stories themselves, which I actually enjoyed. I didn't. I'm a crime fiction author, and I can't. I was trying
Uh,
to watch Room 13. I said, "Oh my God, I don't want to be scared out of my boots." I saw that there were 8 million views on YouTube. Like, oh
mm.
my God, I think it's gonna scare me because I used to read horror when I was young. I used to read Stephen King and all the horror, and I know how for days later my imagination is still fired up. So I said, oh no, I'm not gonna watch it. But I watched
Mm.
a few others. So I just wanted to understand the mechanics of you now becoming a filmmaker. You were self-taught, that's number one. And you're going to tell me whether you had a desire to make other films or whether you were just really wanted to translate your own view into film as opposed to going to go and translate other things. How
Yeah.
about that journey?
I think with me, it's always been like the kind of stories that I want to watch is
Yeah,
what I want, is what I make.
yeah,
Because there's that advice, I don't remember who said it, that write the books you want to read.
yeah.
So when I was watching, even when I was coming out, of course, Nollywood is popular and all that, but
Mm.
I would watch the films and then I would feel some of it was tackling the subjects that I love,
Forget it
Juju,
easily.
yeah. But then the execution was not exactly engaging for me.
Yeah,
And also, even Hollywood films, like maybe I give the example of Wakanda, because
yeah,
everybody is crazy about, oh,
yeah,
Wakanda.
yeah.
And I watch it and I'm like, no, this is crap. Like it's a film I actually hate. I watched it once and I'm like, I'm not watching this ever again. I don't even read the Wakanda
Spirit.
comics or
Yeah.
yeah, because I just found it to okay, it's the way I want the stories to be told. And of
Yeah.
course, first is drawing very much from our mythologies
Mm.
and trying to be as authentic as possible to our mythologies. My problem with Nollywood is a lot of Christianity has watered down how they look at the world. And
Mhm.
so some of their juju things is more about promoting Christianity rather than trying to understand what exactly was is African spirituality. You
Yeah.
get, or in terms of medicine, there is just this looking at it in a black and white way of saying, oh, if it is coming from a Sangoma or from a Ganga or from a Ajwaga, then it's evil. It's primitive. It's all this, and then it has to come from a doctor or from something like that,
Yeah.
a Western trained doctor or things like that. So a lot of that was the problem I was finding with a lot of the films when I was starting out. I'm giving Nollywood because it's the most common
Mhm.
thing, but there are a lot of other films that were, of course, being made on the continent. Even things like District 9, which is everybody's favorite African sci-fi. And I was like, what is it exactly? If you're talking about aliens coming to here, it was more like an American story than an African story.
Mm.
Okay. Because if you were to talk about aliens coming to an African city,
Mm.
you will probably have to contend with all the alien stories that were being told before the colonials arrived. And if you really think about it, a lot of our stories have people walking to the sky and coming back from the sky. Nancy is the more common one from West Africa.
Yeah.
But in East Africa, there is a lot of such stories where people, he gets into some kind of, there is one I read about a guad that they'll get into a guad to go to the sky. Another
Mm.
one will sit on a stool kind of thing, and then it will take them to the sky. But then I'll read these stories and I'm like, these are actually spaceships in our the
Our
way
own
we
way.
are thinking of them now. Yes. There are very few, like the one of Anansi, where it's an animal weaving as like either or a bird flying, but
Yeah.
the vast majority of them,
Mm.
either there is some kind of vehicle they are using, and this vehicle is like a pot, a stool, or something like that, or there is a portal. They go to a certain gate where
Mhm.
if you reach that gate, you can go to the sky.
Yeah.
And today we have portals where people are jumping from one universe to another universe and all that.
Mm. So,
And
mm.
so when I look at District 9, I'm like, yeah, if it is an African sci-fi thing, why not draw from that kind of mythology of people, of the kind of spaceships that we had before and the
Mm.
kind of portals we had, and you might have had a more interesting story. And then the weird thing about all these space travel stories from the African point of view is a lot of them did not have aliens, but they had human beings in the other world.
Yeah.
Sometimes the human beings had tails, but it was not like a monster. It was not like something totally different from what we know. The ones that I know, like it's mostly like they have a tail, and that's the most thing that will differentiate them from human beings. But yeah, what I'm trying to say is there are certain ways of knowing, and there are certain mythologies that I wanted to bring out in my stories, and that's where I was sticking to certain kind of storytelling. Even like with Room 13,
Mhm.
at first it was a ghost story. It was just that I did not have the means of pulling off a ghost visual effect at that point because this was in 2007.
Yeah.
And so I made it a bit more mundane. But then it was a short film and it did not need dialogue or like I particularly set out to write a film without any dialogue,
Yeah.
and for simple reason that like at that point I was discovering the early films, early Chaplin's, and
The silent
which
movie.
were yeah, the silent films which are very visual,
Yeah.
but also I was reading about other filmmakers and like just discovering film. And there was this all the filmmakers from the early years, 60s up to 70s, and they will all talk about film being a visual media,
Yeah.
and you use as little dialogue as possible.
Yeah.
But then at some point, filmmakers, it's not, I don't know if filmmakers became lazy or if capitalism interfered with the filmmaking in Hollywood,
Mhm.
and then everything just became about dialogue.
Yeah.
And yeah, there was a film we were watching recently. I think it's one of those Avenger films where you just watch, you're not even paying much attention because it's basically popcorn films. But there was an explainer that was running on for 2.5 minutes where
Wow.
someone was explaining the universe. I think it was a Doctor Strange thing or something.
Doctor
There
Strange, yeah,
was,
I bet you they, yeah,
yeah, they're trying to explain about,
the
I
multiverse and all
don't,
that stuff. Yeah.
yeah, I don't even know what it was, but I was like, really? 2.5 minutes, and they were dumping it down for the audience. They didn't expect the audience to figure out things on their own. So when I want to make films and I'm making a film, that is my first point of okay, I'm doing a visual thing, so I need to stick to the visuals, and
Yeah.
whether you understand it or not, then you have to understand it without relying on
Mhm.
words. And there's one film that I made last year. It's
Mhm.
also a short film. It's called La Ñoño. And there are like two scenes that have dialogue because I just couldn't, I failed to remove that dialogue from the scene.
Yeah.
But people watch that film and the dialogue is in Acholi language, it's not in
Mhm.
English.
Yeah.
So the two times they watched it in public here in Kampala,
Mhm.
they forgot to run the subtitles. But then at the end of it, people understood what
Wow.
was said.
Wow.
Nobody was confused. Even
Yeah.
when they go to that scene, they're like, oh, we know what is happening. And so the
Mm.
dialogue was not even, of course, you could hear the people talking, but even though you don't know the language, you could figure out what they were talking about. And then
Mhm.
I was like, oh, okay, I'm really now proud of myself. Because when I was making it, I was like, oh, yeah, there's this, it needs, the dialogue has to be there. And I couldn't stop the actors from speaking. I couldn't create a scenario where they were just sitting and,
Yeah.
doing actions. Yeah, but somehow it worked. And I'm like, okay, so those are the things that I look out when I'm trying to create films. I want to do something first that is steeped in mythologies that I know of, but
Mhm.
also in the sense of style, it should be very visual in the
Yeah.
sense of film being a visual media.
Mm.
But I think maybe some of it was also from the limitations or like the situation in Uganda. We do not have a national language other than English.
Yeah.
We don't have a local language which everybody speaks.
Yeah.
So if you're to get actors, either they are speaking English or you're getting actors from one particular ethnic group.
Language. Yeah.
And sometimes that becomes a challenge for me because I'm like, the story has to be told. If it's an Acholi story, there are
Mhm.
no good actors in Acholi, so you probably will be
Good
forced to
actor.
make, yeah, you'll be forced to maybe make the film in Luganda. And yeah, so these considerations also make me go, okay, I need to use as little language as possible so that
Mhm.
the
Yeah.
story is universally understandable, and then I
Mm.
don't have to begin worrying about what kind of dialogue,
Oh.
language I'm using. Yeah, this was more so in the beginning years when I was just starting out. Of course, now there are more trained actors, so it is easier to find actors from whichever ethnic community you go to. But in the beginning, almost every actor was from a certain ethnic group, which was yeah.
Yeah. So the question I want to ask, because for me, I feel that there's space for everything. I believe that there's space for commercial films, as popcorn as they are, and there's space for films that would look at things like, you know how the French would fund art house films because
Mm,
they know that those films are important. So I feel that there's space for all the films, and one should not override the other. But as we
Mhm.
know, that's not the case. The commercial films are the ones that kind of override everything else. And when it comes to films in Africa that are really looking at like what you're doing now, I think you've had to be quite creative in the way you're going about creating what is not deemed commercial, if you know what I mean,
Mhm.
or
Yeah,
popular.
yeah.
So you when you made your film, did you go straight to YouTube, or how did you distribute your film in the beginning? And how do you find the medium that you're using at the moment, along with the funding for your film, for your various.
Yes, I think first, of course, in Africa, the traditional, because there is a lot of gatekeeping in African film,
Mm,
apart from Nollywood that broke out, but then it also created its own gatekeepers. For Africa, like the art house films, because I think my film should have been in art house, maybe, there was a certain demand for what kind of films should come out of Africa. And when I was starting out, the
yeah.
films they liked, of course, poverty porn, trauma films about AIDS and things like that. And I think to some extent, up to now, that is the kind of preferred thing,
Mhm.
even if they have this thing of, oh, we want to represent Africans positively, so they avoid certain topics. Yeah, I did struggle to get by mainstream, the festival attentions, because I remember the first film I made, The Felicitas Fable. It was a fairy tale kind of comedy. And then I made it with another person, I won't mention them, but they made a film based on the Rwandan genocide.
Mm,
And their film, you look at it, and it had a lot of technical errors,
mm,
actually, way more technical errors than mine. But somehow their film traveled the world and kicked
mm,
off their career. And then people will watch mine and they will rubbish it. When I adopted YouTube actually very early, even before Google bought it,
Oh, yeah.
because I remember, yeah, I remember I put there my first film in 2005,
Wow.
2004, 2005.
Really, very early.
Yeah, when it was just coming out. Yeah, and it was a 1 minute film, a horror film, and it got a lot of attention. And
Mm.
that was the first time I realized that I was like, okay,
You can
there
get your
is
audience from
life.
yourself. Yes.
Yeah, I
Side
was
of
like, there is life outside
the main film.
festivals.
Yeah, fantastic.
Yeah, there's some life somewhere outside there. And so since then I began thinking about ways of reaching these niche audiences, like just direct to audience. And of course, even when I made the Room 13, at first I think it was screened in only 2 or 3 festivals, but all the main festivals rejected it. But
Wow.
then YouTube was not the first place I put it in. I remember putting it in 2 or 3 other platforms, because before YouTube became the, I don't know, it's now the only
The
video platform.
MySpace.
Yeah, yes. There was MySpace. There were a lot of other spaces,
Yeah, yeah.
video platforms,
Mm,
and so I will put them in these platforms, and then the film will get a lot of views, and
mm.
I will get a lot of messages from strangers, and oh,
I
this is a
see.
good film.
So
Yeah,
that,
so
that encouraged you.
exactly. And then I put it on YouTube, and then it just took off on its own. And I think at that time also, YouTube's algorithm was not
That's
as
what it
harsh
is.
as
Yeah,
it is
yeah,
now,
yeah. It's very hard.
because at that time, if people watch your film, it gets recommended more. I think it was
Mm,
based on who is watching and how much they're watching and all that. But at some point, I think 2017, YouTube started changing their policies. Some people say they were not changing, but they started enforcing their policies, because there is like a small sex scene in Room 13.
mm,
And I got a message from them saying, oh, this film, it's for adult consumption. I'm like, really? It's an art. You are not even seeing the sex scene. Yes, we see legs, but we don't see, there is no actual nudity. But because there was a simulation of sex, so it was first demonetized, and
mm,
then the algorithm stopped showing it around.
mm,
And yeah, over the years, YouTube's algorithm just kept getting worse. And
mm.
then at some point, your channel becomes popular or it gets more recommendations if the more you produce films. So like you could it was not like back in the day you put out one film in 2 years and it can still get attention from the algorithm. In this case, like they wanted you to keep putting out films like almost every other month or something.
I mean,
And
it's
that,
not a machine.
yeah,
Not sick.
yeah. And then that kind of became more, it suits content creators,
Yeah, for
people
not
like you.
filmmakers. Yeah.
Yes. And so I felt a burnout, and then I just stopped doing stuff on YouTube. But
Mm,
then around that time, I also discovered other online places. There was first Patreon, which
mm,
was like a crowdfunding app, and then I signed up for it. And yeah, I got a lot of people who are interested in like just supporting my work. And then
mm.
they began sending me or pledging to give me some money each time I make a film.
That's yeah.
Um, yeah, but then of recent, I joined. There's a Fediverse, or we call it the Fediverse, but it's
Mm,
Mastodon. Okay, there's a lot of apps on this, but what
mm,
they are is they are not. So, okay, they are social media, but
mm.
it's not social media that is controlled by a particular corporation. It's social media that anybody, even you can set up your own social media and then people join in and
Mhm.
something like that. But each of these platforms, they interconnect with each other.
Oh,
And I found it much more interesting, or a nicer place to share my work
where
that
is
I've
that?
now, it's the Fediverse.
Huh?
It is the Fediverse. I mean,
How do you spell it?
Fediverse. The Fediverse.
Oh,
Okay, maybe to make it
Fediverse,
simpler, yeah,
Fediverse, you know,
Fediverse.
okay.
Yeah, like a universe,
So
but
like a metaverse, but Fediverse.
Fediverse, something like that.
Never heard of it. So do they have a lot of people that are attracted to that?
Oh no, it's not like it's not about the numbers in the Fediverse.
No, no, I'm talking
Okay,
about
I
niche.
have a, yeah, it's a niche kind of thing, but maybe let me explain it in this way.
Okay.
It is like the internet was back in the 2000s, in the
Yeah,
early 2000s,
yeah,
before platforms like, before this big tech began using algorithms
yeah,
and before they became media instead of social media.
yeah.
So that is the best way to describe the Fediverse. And mostly on Mastodon, which is, it's like Twitter, but much
Yeah.
more nicer, you know. And then I've also opened up my own PeerTube channel, or not even just a channel, but my own PeerTube server,
So what
in
do you
the
call
sense
it?
that,
Yeah.
no, PeerTube, it's like YouTube, but imagine a YouTube where you control everything. It's not the algorithm to control what you're
Okay.
putting out
So
there.
PRTU, like PER.
Yeah, PeerTube.
Ah.
So the difference with PeerTube, like if you look at my films on PeerTube, the
Mm.
views are very few, like 100, 200. If you get 300 views, it's like a lot. But then those 300 people are actually people who watch, and they're not watching because an algorithm has shoved
Quality.
the
You are getting quality or
views.
quality. Yes. You're not just
Exactly.
getting casual views. These are people who are keen and who will probably they'll back you. They're committed to your work.
Exactly. Exactly. It is
Fantastic.
something like that.
Ah, yeah, no.
Because with YouTube, like you look at the 8 million views on what happened in Group 13, but you'll find the average view duration is like 3 minutes
Oh,
or
wow.
2 minutes. So that means people are not actually watching the
They're not,
film,
yeah,
but they're, yes, but because the algorithm is counting the views, I
yeah.
mean.
But it's not counting.
So,
Yeah.
yes, this is the difference with PeerTube, and this is where I'm making it now my main distribution platform. And of course, it's not a commercial place, like you can't go there to make money, but you can go there to share your work to people who
And get create
can,
awareness.
yes. And then, so I do crowdfunding a lot. And when people watch these kinds of films, like I was saying, it's quality views, and then people actually enjoy it. And
Mhm.
you just put the donate button and say, oh, please donate to me
Oh,
or
yes.
send me some money. And then you find donations. And now, as I'm creating new short films, I find it easier to ask people to contribute to the films
Yeah.
because they have watched something. I tried doing that on YouTube, but
Difficult because you are
yeah, because
watching. Yeah, it's difficult. You need to create
yes,
your own audience.
exactly. And the audience in YouTube is not a reliable audience. People are there because of the trends, they're there because something, the algorithm is shoving
Mm,
videos onto their faces. And then you're still watching this, and then something else is coming up, and then you click on the other one, so you even forget what
yeah,
you've watched like 5 seconds ago.
yeah,
So yeah, looking going forward, I think this is going to be my main way
yeah.
of distributing films. I'll probably not be sharing on YouTube. But the other way also is just like even within Kampala, we keep organizing screenings, and it's not again red carpet affairs or big bang affairs, but I create small screenings
Mm-hmm.
where
Intimate,
they're like,
intimate.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And then you find yourself having one or two more new fans.
Mm.
And it seems counterproductive because with filmmakers, they want to go out and make reach hundreds and hundreds of
Yeah, but it is that
hundreds of thousands.
you might reach hundreds and hundreds, but what we are
Mhm.
talking about something that will grow. And we're talking about something that is not an overnight. You reach hundreds, you reach millions, and then
Exactly.
it's no longer
Sustainability.
sustainability. The idea of holding the audience and holding your followers or your
Yes.
audience, and they follow you all the
Mhm.
way. I think that's the best thing.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. I
Rather
think,
than yeah,
yes. And that is, I believe also because at the moment, the way social media is going, it's become what they call enshittified. It's becoming worse and worse.
yeah, no, it's not.
And I know like everybody is now creating, like there's this hustle like, oh, cr- put your thing on YouTube, get followers, or TikTok is the other thing. Then they're making very short things, which, I don't know how far it will go.
Yeah.
But with sustainability, because I make about 3 or 4 films every year, and they're really intense films. Like it takes me like 5 months to create one
Mm.
short film,
Yeah.
and I can do this with the support of the crowd, like people I get through crowdfunding and through, yeah. And it becomes much more satisfying to me
Mm.
because I can now focus on like
Your art.
making a film, yeah, not thinking about it going to festivals,
Yeah.
not thinking about it going to anywhere, but I'm just like, okay,
Try
there
to
are
be the
these,
gatekeepers. Yeah, you don't want to, you
yeah,
who want to have control over your intellectual, your IP.
exactly, something of that kind.
There's so much landmine. It's crazy about all these things.
Mhm.
So
Yeah,
you're able to do this on your own for yeah, quite a long time. And now we're
since 2017.
yeah, so now we're in the era of new tech, AI and all that. So the question I want to ask is how are you going to harness AI? Are you in terms of how you want to create? I'm not talking about maybe in film or in cinema, but any kind of
Mhm.
way that you're going to use that tool as a tool or as an assistant. That's
Ah, mhm,
number one. Number two, as the future approaches and things are more automated, there's going to
mhm.
be, I believe that there's going to be a shift towards community and people like yourselves are going to excel in the new world. I don't know if you believe that or not. So let's start with AI. No, yeah, that's what I see. That's what I see. So
Hopefully.
let's start with AI first. What's your opinion?
AI, I don't think that's a technology that's going anywhere. It's
Okay.
going to make a few salesmen rich,
Mm,
but for the ordinary filmmaker, it's not going to help them at all
yeah,
because it's not the way it is being AI at the way it has come out now. I think they rushed that technology.
yeah,
It could have been helpful. It could have actually been a game changer. But I think they were more after the money
mm,
than perfecting the technology.
yeah,
And so, as it is now, it is pretty useless. And there is more of a hype around it than an actual functionality. If you look at Coca Cola, they make an ad, their Christmas ad using AI. Yeah. And they're saying we used very few people. You get. But then to make that ad, they spent 70 or they made 70,000 shots or an equivalent of shots. They made
70,000.
70,000 videos before they could come up with that
For God's sake,
with that
70,000.
you get. So this now you begin asking yourself like, okay, how efficient is that?
Yeah, in time.
Because if it was human beings doing that art,
They craft it. They will craft it.
yeah, they'll craft it and they will not do 70,000
Yeah.
shots.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm saying shots because I'm used to shots
Mhm.
in the film world. But then there are other problems also with AI because one, it's going to benefit only the tech companies, not the actual filmmakers. If you look at maybe Sora or wherever it is,
Yeah.
you as a filmmaker, you're not going to have any skill in creating a visual effect. You're going to write prompts and then the thing vomits out whatever video it's giving you.
Yeah.
But you won't know how to make that kind
Yeah.
of thing. And so
Yeah.
you're going to become dependent
On
on
him. Yeah.
the other thing. And then anytime they want to increase their prices,
You're
you're
stuck.
screwed. You get. And then yeah, and it's just not it's I don't think it's going anywhere the way
Mm.
it is. Because even for the tech companies themselves, they are not ever going to make money out of this technology. In the sense that the more people use AI tools, the more expensive it becomes for them
Right.
to run it.
Yeah.
Because even just with my own small computer here, which I use to create my visual effects, the more I'm running it, the more the GPU wears out, and then I have to buy a new GPU. And this is just one GPU with just me doing my small, yeah, small films and all that. It's not even a massive but on a global scale, imagine you have 1 million people all using your GPUs. And the more you're running it, the more power you're using, the more water it is consuming. And at the end of the day, you're spending more money to create this one video than it will. So they are not ever going to make money. And of course, there is also the ethics of using AI, which is the first thing that made me not ever want to use AI. Of course, in the beginning, like everybody else, I played around with the tools and to see what was possible with it. But then once it became clear that they are not paying people, that they are stealing artists' work to train
Yeah.
their models,
Yeah.
I was like, okay, this is not fine. You can't just steal people's works and use it to train models in the name of progress.
Yeah.
Outside of that, it is also harmful to the environment. It's burning more carbon.
Yeah.
And then the worst of it is that it's making human beings compete with technology for natural resources like water. So you find a town is competing with a data center for water. And I don't know which world I would want to live in where,
You're
you know,
competing with the machine to run.
yeah, the machine for drinking water. That just doesn't make sense. So at
Mm.
the moment, I'm not ever going to use AI in
Mm.
my workflows. There are some tools, they are called, they, they might be have been branded as AI, but they are not. They are, the people who make them don't put the label AI on
Yeah.
it because, of course, because AI has been given a bad name.
Yeah. So what
But
are those?
the, yeah, it's like an automation, of course. It makes some work easy. Like in Blender, there are some plugins, like there is one called Kin Tools. It helps you if you want to track someone's face and replace. Like now, I don't have glasses, and if I
Mm.
want to put glasses on my face, I can create a 3D model of my face and then have the glass on it, something in simple terms that is it. But this tool runs locally on my machine. I don't have to depend on a tech company somewhere to use this tool. Yeah. Or there are others like for motion capture where you can arrange just smartphones around a human being and
Mhm.
then the person makes movements and then that tool converts that movement into motion on a 3D space. It is useful because you're not burning the environment or you're not using the whole town's water to make that small video. You're using your computer,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
just as much power as you can afford to use. The power that you use every day is what you're using to create this tool. And also in DaVinci Resolve, which is like one of our main editing softwares, you find they have a lot of such tools that you can use within your computer. And I think that is a more ethical way. And I will use some of these kinds of tools, but they are not generative. You cannot just say, give me a video of a cat
Just
dancing
take it.
on a table, and
Yeah.
you get that video, because that is not the point. First, if I'm to do that, I have maybe to model the cat, and maybe I can use the tools to make the life easier, to maybe capture my motion and then transfer that motion to the cat. Those are acceptable uses of AI.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, with the way it is being marketed now, like you just generate videos and you get whatever you want to get out of it, it's
Mm-hmm.
not going anywhere. I don't think it's in a year or two, it probably will be. If you remember crypto,
Yeah.
at some point everyone was like, "This is the future,"
Crypto
but
is
where
still
is
there.
it now? It
Crypto
is
is
still there, but it's only used by criminals. A few criminals are the ones who use it.
okay.
Yeah, there was also NFTs.
Yeah.
It was a craze. At some point, everyone was like, "Yeah, NFTs. It's going to be the craze." But now nobody is even talking of NFTs. So there's a lot of these tech things that keep coming up, and because of capitalism, they push it onto people, and
Yeah.
then they claiming, "Oh, this is the next big thing. This is the next
Yeah.
big thing," and yet it's just
Another,
snake oil.
another trend.
They are
Another.
selling, yeah, they are selling snake oil basically, convincing people, like trying to make money out where they shouldn't be making
Yeah.
money. Yeah. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's it with AI. I don't know of any artist actually who is embracing AI,
Mm-hmm.
unless they are artists who don't know what they are doing, or they are bad artists. The ones who can't actually do anything are the ones who are running to AI.
Yeah.
But people who can actually get stuff done, like people who've learned how to draw or who really want to use their talents, I don't see anyone going for AI.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to talk about what what how do you see yourself in the next 5 or 10 years? What is your ideal thing that you would want in the space that you are in now? Because I can see that you're not interested in going the popular route or anything like that. You're very much focused and very committed to how you make your films and what you make.
I think where I see myself is just maybe growing a crowd. I don't want to call them fans, but just people who enjoy my films,
Okay,
and
committed.
gathering them. Yeah, yeah, just engaging a lot with such people. I probably look at myself having some kind of platform. Maybe you can compare it with Netflix, but
That
not
you can
a
that,
subscription based thing. Yeah.
yeah.
I have a peer tube channel. I'll probably see a lot of people following the peer tube channel. I still make short films, a lot of short films, and put them on peer tube for free. And then there's some good, maybe $1 or $2 that comes in. And it's not going to make me super rich, but at least it pays the bills
Yeah, that's
and it bills for creating that film.
yeah.
I think if I reach that kind of place
Mm,
where I am making work with people who enjoy the art, and it's not being driven purely just by a money making thing, then I'll say I'm in a good place. Of course, I don't fool myself. We're in a capitalist world,
yeah,
and sometimes you have to do capitalism to survive in this world.
yeah.
But I'll probably look at it from a more human kind of place. If, of course, one of my films takes off and then I get maybe $10 million out of it, or $20 million, I'm not going to throw the money into a river and say no. Yeah, but of course, I'll probably put it to good use and find, build a theater in Kampala,
Yeah, that'd be lovely.
or build this. I'll probably use my money for something like that. Build just some community thing that people can
Good.
enjoy. Because even now, with the little money I've made, I built a studio and it's
Fantastic.
more of a community kind of thing where,
For my use.
yeah, emerging filmmakers, they have access to it for free if they work within our collective. So yeah, I'll probably use the money for something similar. Yeah, I'm thinking maybe also the model that we know today
Mm,
might collapse, the filmmaking model, the mainstream filmmaking model. Festivals will still be there,
mm.
maybe, but the way of making money through either selling to Netflix or selling to the broadcasters, that might go away. It might not stay. You might find a lot more people like me, like just independent
That's
artists
what I was
having
saying.
their own, yeah,
Community.
their own small thing somewhere, and then the consumers of films, they spread themselves out to all these other things. I think that's already, sorry, I think
Mm.
that's already happening with Hollywood, with the studios. Like the studio model might be collapsing,
Yeah, I think it is.
and
Yeah.
yeah, they're going more for the smaller, or basically crew, like the VFX artists, the DOPs, the what. They're probably going to get more work in smaller establishments than in Hollywood,
Mm.
and maybe Hollywood will remain for,
The
you
big, big
know,
one.
yeah, the popcorn things, but the vast majority of filmmakers might be working in independent,
Independently, yeah, and have their
yeah,
own community.
independently, yeah, something of that kind. Yeah.
So in terms of your crowd, do you communicate with them via like things like mailing list and all that? Do you have a mailing list? Or how,
Um,
what's your main form of communication? Apart from saying, give me money. Go.
there's actually, I have my website.
Okay.
People, they read the things, but they don't subscribe to the mailing list. So the crowd
Okay.
that I'm in, they're probably not very keen on signing up with for email things.
Mm.
But there is other ways that I reach people. I
Okay.
just put out a blog post, and I don't follow the stats too much, but I do see people reading and it reaching to people. Of course, with a place like Mastodon, because there's no algorithm to dictate what people see on their timelines. So the people who follow me there, when I post, they all will see what I've posted, and so it gets a much bigger reach than if, say, it is an actual mailing list. And then some people, they use RSS feeds to access my blog.
Okay.
And yeah, it, because you subscribe to it, you don't have to go to your email to, even me personally, I don't like subscribing to things on my email.
Mm.
I just keep email for work and for serious stuff.
Mhm.
But so I think a lot of people are like me. I have a newsletter option, but it doesn't. I don't think there are probably 50 subscribers or 60, and it's been, that number has been there for a long time without any new people coming on.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
but
go on. Sorry.
yes, but I think the important thing, like if you want to reach out to people, is to be consistent in whatever platform you're on. And if you're consistent, whether somebody subscribes by email or they don't subscribe at all, they will come and find your work.
Find
And I
you, yeah.
think that is, yeah,
Mm.
yeah.
Mm. So in terms of, I just wanted to ask about, so do you, so in terms of making a living, is this, do you do this full time or do you make a living in other ways?
No, I make films full time.
That's fantastic. I love that. Your
Yeah.
subscribers are looking, they're looking, your patrons are looking after you.
It's not actually patrons and Patreon, they cover the basics of
Yeah,
production basics, like so that I don't make a loss. Okay, not exactly a loss, but say I want to shoot a film, I need to pay actors, I
yeah,
need to buy food,
yeah.
transport
You have a
people,
budget. You have a
pay
budget.
for, exactly.
Mhm.
So what my crowdfunding does is to cover this. It's not to make a profit.
Yeah.
And once I've covered this, then I can make the film. And after making the film, I still put it out, and then whoever donates, donates. But also, sometimes I get the money from fees,
Okay.
screening fees,
Mm.
like when a festival screens and also things like that. Yeah, but a lot of the times we get money from grants, really.
Yeah, I wanted
Like,
to ask about that. If you
yeah,
grants. Okay,
yeah,
that's
because
what question.
probably that probably makes the pays the bills
Yeah.
because with the grant you can write and say, "Oh, I
You
want
can
this
breathe.
much,"
You can
and
breathe and still
yes, you
continue.
can.
This is
Yes,
an important part of culture that you're doing. So grants are very important. They are very, it's vital to what you're doing. Yeah.
yeah, but of course the grants wouldn't come if I was not if I didn't have the crowdfunding and the patrons to
Yeah. Okay.
support because a grant comes and people say, "Oh, you're doing all this work," and then it's easier for someone to give you the grant
Yeah.
than if you don't have anything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So another question is, so how about future filmmakers who are interested in doing what you're doing at the moment? Do you have any forum or any advice for young filmmakers or any kind of forum where you'll be teaching them or pass your knowledge across?
If they're in Uganda, we already have a huge training program.
Oh,
It runs in 5 districts, but we have a collective, a film collective, where emerging filmmakers can come and learn. And if they're in Kampala, they can use my studio for free. I give them equipment for free.
oh,
Outside, we work with some organizations like there's Lolwe, it's a magazine, but they have these trainings that they keep doing. And if somebody signs up for the Lolwe trainings, I think there's some small fee that they pay,
mhm.
but it's another opportunity. But the thing that I will maybe encourage, of course, when I say I'm self taught, it doesn't mean I never got any mentorship from anyone. I think almost all I had a lot of mentors
That's
here
fantastic.
and there. Of course, it was not formal. It was not a school thing where I sit down and what, but I had to learn from other people. Uh, Either this was through books. I bought filmmaking books and I read them, or I ran into filmmakers and then I would ask them. So the problem that most filmmakers or new emerging filmmakers, the mistake they do is forgetting that it's a learning process. And then somebody makes one short film and then they imagine they have arrived. The film might actually go to festivals and it does very well.
Need to be
And
consistent.
then,
Put
yes, and
more.
then they jump into feature films and now they want to make feature films. And then, yeah, I think it might work, but I think learning never stops. And yeah, I think even right now, I've been making films since 2007.
Mhm.
In my hard drives, I think now, yesterday I was clearing out space and there was about 100 GB of tutorials.
My God.
Because every other day I'm downloading a tutorial
Mm.
and trying to figure out, oh, how do I do this?
What if you learn
Every
it?
other day.
Yeah.
So it never stops. And I think if you want to go far in filmmaking,
Yeah.
that's the attitude you need to adapt and just know that you will never know everything.
Yeah.
And like even when I do a short film now and I light it properly, the
Mhm.
next time I'm going to do another film, I just go online and look, okay, how did this person light their film? How did
Mm.
this one do their thing? Because with art, it's not like accounting or those other jobs where once you do something,
Yeah.
that's it. Like you do the formula and you'll get the same result. You do the formula, you get
Mhm.
the same result.
Yeah.
Filmmaking is an art form, and like any art, it keeps evolving, it keeps changing, and how you create that art is never static. It's never in a static form, and you have to keep evolving with, of course, the technologies. Of course, avoiding technologies like AI, but just figuring out how other people are doing the things,
What?
how you can also improve on how you do your stuff. I've never had a film where I'm like, yes, I know everything. I'm
Yeah.
going to do everything. There's always something that I learn from that project. And it's just because even the tools we are using like 5 years ago are not the same tools we are using today.
Yeah. Because
And that's again the other problem with a lot of, especially in all the ones I've seen in Kampala. I will find a light person, a gaffer, But the way they were lighting 10 years ago is the same way they are lighting today. And I've had challenges with
Oh my
some
God.
of them. We've had big quarrels. I'll even tell them that, 10 years ago, you were using only the small LED lights, but
Mhm.
now we are having 2K lights, we have 4K lights, and they are
And
very
they're not.
cheap. Yeah, you have to learn how to use these lights, but
Mhm.
they get stuck in a certain mindset, and they know that this is how I do things. And there's so they, even when they get the newer lights, they still apply the same techniques they were using 10 years ago.
Mhm.
And then you find that they are not actually lighting, but they're just flooding the scenes with light. And
Yeah.
yeah. So the best advice I can give anyone who wants to make films is, yeah, learning is filmmaking is a continuous learning process. You never ever reach a point where you say, this is it. I've now known. See, even when you look at films like Mad Max Fury Road,
Mhm.
there is always a lot of experimentation going on.
Oh, yeah.
Like,
That's what I noticed. Yeah.
yeah, they when they were shooting the day for night, because they shot Mad Max during daytime, but a lot of there was a formula for shooting day for night, and these guys were like, "No, we are not going to do that. We are going to do it in a different way," and they overexpose the films instead of underexposing it. And the traditional way of shooting day for night is you try to underexpose so that you get the night feel during daytime.
Yeah.
And these guys were overexposing, doing the exact opposite. And I think somebody had to sit down and teach themselves and say, oh, if I overexpose, what am I going to get?
Experimentation. Yeah. You work with different.
Yes,
Yeah. Doing things.
exactly. Experimentation is probably the right
Yeah.
one, but I
Mm-hmm.
just call it learning, because when you're experimenting, you're learning new things.
Yeah.
So you never stop learning. Yeah.
Yeah. You don't. So I wanted to ask about, so in terms of equipment, when you started out, how did you build up your equipment? And do you find that a challenge now, apart from lighting and the gaffer? You find
No, I
equipment
think
or yeah, fine.
equipment has become very cheap
Mm,
now, and yeah, like very cheap at the
interesting.
moment, because when we were starting out, my phone is ringing. When we
Mm,
were starting out, we like it was hard to get good cameras first
mm,
of all, and we couldn't even just getting film equipment. It was very expensive.
yeah.
But then starting around 2012, when the DSLRs became very cheap, filmmaking gears just began dropping in costs. And
Mm,
so right now, for $1,000, $1,200, you can get a cinema quality camera in the
wow,
Blackmagic Pocket 4K.
fantastic.
But even phones, like I remember starting out teaching around 2016,
Mhm,
we're teaching people how to shoot with phones.
mhm,
But right now, the way cameras have become so cheap, you don't even need to do the phones anymore. But if I'm stuck, I can still get a very good picture with the phone
mm,
instead of going for a very high-end camera. But yeah, equipment, it has become so cheap that,
yeah.
yeah, very cheap, and the barriers to entry have gone
Mm,
so,
now,
so low. Yeah. Yeah, we don't struggle too much as we used to.
fantastic. How about the
Yeah.
tools? Because you need your computers and the editing tools. What tools do you use? What editing software do you use?
With the computers, that is where the problem still lies, because yeah, because you need computers with good GPUs, but still GPUs are also getting cheaper. Maybe the thing with the AI boom might flood the market with very cheap GPUs at some point, because once the bubble bursts, you might find there's a lot of GPUs floating around, and people will be able to get end stuff for very cheap. But yeah, with computers, mostly use open source software, and they've actually helped me. And I stopped using things like Adobe, because Adobe, it became enshittified, and it just became unsustainable to use Premiere Pro or Photoshop or things like that. So what I do, because with every product that is out there with a very high price tag on it, there is an open source alternative that is free,
Mhm.
and as efficient as that high priced thing. So for Maya, there is Blender, and Blender actually a film that won the Oscars when two Oscar films have used Blender, and Blender is an open source software. The film Everything Everywhere All at Once, they
Mhm.
used Blender for the visual effects. And
Wow.
then recently there was Flow, which was
Mhm.
entirely made on Blender. So it's what I use, and it's a free open source software. I don't pay even a coin to use it. But sometimes, of course, out of appreciation, I support the developers of Blender. There are other tools like Krita and GIMP.
Okay.
Uh, yeah, there's Ado for music composition.
So Krita, how do
Um,
you spell Krita?
Krita is Krita.
Okay.
It's basically like Photoshop.
Okay.
But yeah, mostly it's artists
What's
who
the one
use
for music?
Krita. Pardon?
What's the one for music? You said
Or for music, Ado, Ardour,
ARDOUR. So Ado.
Ard, yeah,
Ado?
something like that. I
Ado.
don't, yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know
All
how they
sorts of names.
pronounce it.
All sorts of names for music.
Yeah,
Mm.
and then there is LMMS, which is the lower end, the lower version, and also there was Audacity, which replaced
Okay.
Audition.
Mm.
Yeah, but then it got bought up by someone who is ruining it, and
Mm.
so
So
there is a
somebody has
fork
bought
of
it.
it.
Okay.
Yeah,
So that's the thing. Okay.
Audacity. Yeah, but now there is the other one you can use. It's called Tenacity.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same thing.
So different things.
So with
There are tools
me,
out there.
yeah, what I do if I'm looking for any software or any tool,
Mhm.
I know there is an open source alternative somewhere out there,
Yeah.
and yeah, it's always very efficient, as efficient as the one that has the price tag on it.
Yeah.
And you'll find people using words like industry standard, but
Mhm.
these are all just marketing gimmicks
Okay.
because yeah,
Okay. There's
it
ways of.
might be it might be industry standard to Europe or to Hollywood
But
because yeah, but if you're in Africa and you're not ever going to go to Europe and to work in Hollywood, what industry are you talking about? Yeah.
wow. Sorry, because I should have asked this question. I just want to ask about your
Mm.
process. So you get
Mm.
your script. Do you start with a short story or do you just write a script? I know you love your visual work, but so what is your process for filming? So
Uh, yeah, of course, I always start with a script.
okay,
I can't film without a script.
yeah, and then
But yeah, normally I keep them separate. Short stories are short stories, films are films.
okay,
I don't, there are some stories that I retell
mhm,
in a different format, but it won't be the same story.
okay,
Yeah, but always I will start with a script. And the script is for me is always the very first or the most important thing. So unless I'm really happy with the script, I
mhm,
won't even think about shooting. The first thing I do, of course, is to make sure I have a very strong, of course, the characters. Most of my stories they revolve around characters, and
yeah,
it's more about the characters and their journeys and what they are doing.
mhm.
I rarely try to write the stories with like what they call high stakes, where the whole world is about to end and then only one person can save it,
No,
or
like
if
one
it's
character's
money.
one. No, one character's one
Yeah.
is about to end because I watched Love Clone, the poor woman.
Oh yeah. Yes, exactly. So those are
Her
the
world,
things that
world was ending and she had to do something about it.
exactly. I just focus on the individual, and I like stories that revolve around the individual. So even some of the stories I'm creating now, they seem like they are big stories. The short film that I'm going to make, which I'm crowdfunding for at the moment, it's set in the future, and it's this a world without capitalism, without governments, without politicians, and it's just
Interesting.
ordinary people. Yeah, but that will just be a container, and then the story will really focus on the one person and his wife having an argument over over chicken, and yeah, but all these other things will come out, and
Yeah.
people will be able to enjoy the world.
So you mentioned short story and then you mentioned film. So can you tell me the difference between the two?
Films are short stories
Yeah,
because a
that's what I
film,
thought. Yeah,
yeah, a short story is something you can consume in one sitting, and
yeah.
in most cases, films. you consume them in one sitting.
Yeah.
But in literature, we have a short story which is
Yeah.
like prose.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like you write maybe 5,000 words or around there, and it's not, yeah, it's easier to do it because unlike film, which needs actors and equipment and all the visual effects, with a short story, you can just write whatever is happening and it's just text. I think that's the difference that I'm talking about.
Yeah, because I'm doing this series of short stories set in Lagos in Nigeria, and it's a
Mm,
detective, and
mm.
I've written about 5 or 6 stories set in the same universe. And I've been
Ah,
thinking, yeah, the same universe, the same, but I'm not writing it as a novel but I've been thinking
mm,
that if I wanted to make it into a film at some point in the future, would it work? Because they're
mm.
a series of short stories. So the same person doing different, like a series, like how you have it.
Yeah, of course, anything can work. If you look at the Wanuri's film, what was it, Rafiki? Because it came from a short story. It came from a short story called Under the Jambula Tree or something like that. I think normally it's about the ability of a screenwriter to adapt the material from whatever written form it is in. So there's nothing which is impossible with adaptation. The only challenge is if a material doesn't have like enough meat to like maybe warrant a feature film or a TV series, then the person who is adapting it will probably have the liberty to create
More.
stuff,
Okay.
yeah, to push it into a feature length thing.
Mm.
Like Rafiki, I think it was the short story, it was very compact and it couldn't go into
Yeah.
a feature film, but of course they could build up on it and create something
So,
completely
yeah, because what I was
new.
thinking was a series of, how you have all these TV detectives every week, you have a different story, but the same characters.
Ah,
What
oh
are
yeah, yeah.
same character, but doing different things. So, like,
Oh, it's like a serialized kind
it's
of
real life, yeah.
thing. Yeah. It is possible. You develop it as a series then, but normally what you will do is first develop the world because with the TV, they
Mm-hmm.
don't write the episodes, or
Mm-hmm.
like the person creating doesn't write the episodes. They might write just the first episode and then they create the framework for how the series will
Will
appear.
evolve.
Like who is this detective? Where does he live? What kind of person is he? There are all those things that they have to figure out, and also what is the selling point of the series, like what triggers the stories. Yeah, is it a comedy? Is it a horror? Yeah, then once you figure that out,
Yeah.
um,
And
then of
that's it.
course the producers take it in. Yeah, the
Mm.
producers take it up, and then you have a team of writers who come and sit, and then they blow it up into proper series. Yeah.
And change your story. Oh, so we've come to nearly the end of this. Is fascinating. Sit down and continue to pick brain all night. So, if people want to connect with you, where do you want them to? What's the best place? I know you've got your website. Dil-
Yeah,
Dilman,
dilmandila.com.
yeah, Dilman. Is it Dilman? Yeah, DilmanDila.com.
Dilmandila.com. Yeah.
Yeah. And then Dilman Stories on YouTube.
Deal Stories,
Sorry,
YouTube.
Dil Stories on YouTube. Anywhere
Yeah,
else that
but
you want them to
yeah, PeerTube channel, which
okay. So
is
YouTube channel.
it's tv.dealstories.com. And
So
then they'll find it. And then, of course, on Mastodon, you can get me on at Dilmandila at mograph.social.
okay.
Yeah,
More graph.
mograph. Yeah,
Okay. So social.
mod.social. Yeah, the Fediverse, they have weird ways of creating handles.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So you
it's
created
that
your
whole
own
long thing.
more graph. More graph, like graphic, yeah, moregraph.com.
Yeah, it's motion graphics. It's
Oh, motion.
basically a server. Yeah,
More graph. Okay. Okay.
it's a server for motion for VFX artists and things like that.
Mm. Okay. So and any other do you do like Instagram or any of those kind of
No, I left all the.
you'll be left and
It's
hidden
only
yourself, you'll be hiding yourself away.
no, I left because they were not working for me and they were
Yeah.
just becoming really horrible places. So
Yeah.
I deleted my Facebook, I deleted Twitter, I
Oh
deleted
God.
Instagram. Yeah.
Wow.
YouTube, I still tolerate it because I
Oh, please
mean,
don't delete. YouTube is still because it's a for me,
yeah,
like that was the first place I was able to find you on YouTube. So
ah,
please don't
yeah, I
delete
tolerate it because, but it is becoming a bad place as well because they are shoving AI onto everything.
it.
And
Mm.
then you open a video and then there is an AI narrator and you have not allowed the AI to narrate your thing.
Oh,
Then, yeah, there's all that happening,
I've seen some narrators
especially,
with using popular
yeah,
faces and it's AI voices. And
yeah,
it's my goodness, what's going on? Because these are like popular faces who probably are not the ones.
yeah.
Wow.
So why would I stay in such a platform? And
Mm.
also, like now, maybe if you do this podcast and then somebody is listening to it in French, then the AI is going to use
In French.
the AI voice in French. And yeah, it becomes problematic
I
to,
better go and do it myself in French then. I've not even bothered
yeah,
doing any language translation. I've not even done any of those things.
yeah, they are apparently not even asking for permission.
Yeah, so I
They
better
just do it.
let me go and do my thing myself. No, they're not bothering. I can see that
Mm.
just using people's original material. But thank you
Yeah.
so much for coming for this interview. I've really enjoyed it and your process. And please don't delete yourself from YouTube.
Thank you
I
too.
will go and find you wherever you are. I'll go to Peer. I will go to Peer,
You find me on PeerTube.
PeerTube, and
Yeah, that's my main
Mastodon.
go-to
Yeah,
place now.
Mastodon. I'll go and look for you because obviously you are really like for your your fans. Yeah, just for your fans. If you're not interested, which is the future really. That's the future. I know
Yeah,
about
yeah.
the future because there's so much proliferation of machine produced things that everybody's looking for genuine people to follow now because I don't want to follow an
Mhm.
AI person. I want to if I'm interested in somebody, I want to follow them genuinely. So I rather join their community. I rather go and find out and I do my research and go and find out and follow
Who
them
they
than
are,
for me to be following the whole
the
everything.
whole bandwagon. Yeah.
So I'm not into that at all. But yeah, thank you very much and
Thank you too.
thanks a lot, Dilman.
Okay. Thank
Thank you.
you. Bye.
Bye. So that was Dilman Dila, and that was a very interesting conversation that we had. I'm still diving deep into filmmaking of different types, and this is from completely different from the people I've spoken to. I spoke to Hamid Ibrahim of Kugali Media, and I remember quite a few other filmmakers that I've spoken to, each doing their own thing. And film as a medium is so popular, but you can see that someone like Dillman has found a niche. He's not even interested in any popular, like going through the gatekeepers or going through festivals. He wants to make the film that are true to himself and true to what he wants to convey. And the people that are interested in him are following him and funding him. And then he's getting funds from grants. People like him, I feel, are quite important to the future of authentic expression of filmmaking in Africa. And I think what really impresses me is him looking for different medium to convey his art. Because if one medium, for me, my fear is always that a medium, a website, or a platform could die. If you're a creator, a content creator of any type, then make sure that you are on as many platforms as possible. So that at least one for me, I always feel that if one of my articles should, so even on my website, if my website should ever go and not be functional for the future, I make sure that my articles are on as many platforms as possible so that before they die out in the future, they'll still be on the internet for a while. I really admire his commitment to his art and the roots he's followed in being true to what he does. So yeah, the Mandela, filmmaker, short storyteller, author. Thank you very much for listening to me. If you're watching this podcast on whichever platform that you're on, review it, like it, follow, subscribe. If you're watching on YouTube, subscribe. I need my followers, the people that are subscribed to go up. So subscribe to it. The more people I have, the more I'm encouraged to continue to talk to different people and look at how technology is helping them in their industry. So yeah, thank you very much for listening to me and stay well. Bye.